Hello and welcome to the 741 channel. Thank you for stopping by. Today we're going to take a look at replacing the brake lines on my 2004 Chevy Tahoe. I originally started out doing a front caliper job on this Tahoe, and then as I started changing the brake hoses I realized that the steel brake lines were pretty rotted on this thing, and I ended up breaking one just trying to change the brake hose. So time to replace them. So I know that changing brake lines on these vehicles is a bit of a chore. I guess when some garages go to do the job, they separate the body from the frame in order to do that. Now I've seen at least one video that shows that this can be done without separating the body and the frame. If you want to see that video, I'll leave a link to it in the description below. But I'm going to use his method and try that on my vehicle and see if it works. So we're taking a look at the rear driver's side of the Tahoe. I've got the thing up on jack stands at this point. And of course I've got the rear wheel removed. Well, the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this inner fender well here to get access to everything back here. And this just has a series of those plastic clips that hold it in. You can see this one's missing. And then there's a few small screws that hold it in here at the bottom of the wheel wells in the front and in the back. So we'll just get all those removed and open this up. Let's see if this will come out of here now. I'm not sure if these fasteners need to be removed or not, so I'm going to tug on this a bit and see what happens. The next thing I'm going to do is drop the spare tire. I don't think the spare tire on this vehicle's ever been removed. Looks pretty rusty, so hopefully it comes out. Okay, so there's really not a lot of room to work with in here, but you can see we're under the truck and we're above sort of the cross member of the frame rail, between the frame rail and the body. And you can see this is where the back brake line comes in and goes to this hose that kind of goes down to where the rear axle is. So this is the first line that I'm going to try and crack up here. Hopefully you guys can see what's going on here. We're under the truck now and we're looking at the rear brake line where it connects into this rubber hose that's here, and this travels down to the top of the rear axle, which is below what you're looking at now. You may be able to tell that I've got my 6-point line wrench on here, and this has got a bit of an angle on it, so it's facing forward and it's able to clear this frame rail that's here. Hopefully you guys can kind of see that. Now the other thing that I'll mention is that I've sprayed this down with PB Blaster to try and help things. Oh yeah, oh that came loose, that's good. Okay, I couldn't see it, but I think it loosened up. You guys can see it better than me. Now, I almost forgot, I gotta get this clip off of here before I go any further, so I'm gonna get a screwdriver and try and do that. Hopefully you can see there I've got the clip mostly out, and what I ended up doing was using this pair of extra long needle nose pliers under the clip to kind of pry it up. I used a screwdriver with my other hand and pushed against the bottom parts of the clip to kind of push them in towards the bracket, and then just kind of worked this out, and now it's free. So I really wasn't able to loosen that fitting up there. There just isn't enough room to work. I think even if I could get the fitting loose, the line would break. So it really doesn't matter at this point. What I think I'm going to do is cut it down here where it's easily accessible, and then we'll just work it out the rest of the way. I'm probably going to replace that rubber hose anyway, so there's probably no point in struggling with trying to remove the fitting. So as you can see, I've got the line nicked. I don't have it quite all the way through. I'm going to let the brake fluid leak out of here. I've got a pan underneath where it's dripping. Once that stops dripping, I'll either cut the line the rest of the way or just snap it at this point. Okay, now that I've got this brake line cut, I'm just going to bend it down and hopefully some of the extra fluid will come out. So we will come back here eventually to change that hose and these lines that go to the brake calipers in the back. But first off, I'm going to go to the front and remove the fitting for the line that we just disconnected. Okay, so hopefully you guys can see what's going on here. We're up under the truck, roughly under the driver's door, and this here is the ABS module. Anyhow, you can see here there's two black, shiny new lines. Well, they're not new, but the previous owner of this truck must have replaced them, and I've owned the truck for 2 years. They still look pretty good, so I'm not going to touch those. These go up to the master cylinder. But you can see the three rusty lines up on the top. Those are the ones that I'm going to need to change. And the first one that I'm going to do is this one on the right, the one with the sharp bend in it. That's the one that I just cut the other end of, so we're going to work on that one first. And the other two go to the left and right calipers, which will change a little later in the video. So as you may be able to see, I've got all of the brake lines removed here except for one. And I ended up having to remove those newer brake lines because they were in the way of me being able to remove the ones that I really wanted to get out of there. So anyway, I did leave that one in the middle for now, just so I don't lose track of what's what here. So I'm going to start by trying to remove the rear line, which kind of runs up here above the frame rail and behind this wiring harness. So I'm going to pull this tube out of here. I think this is the windshield washer fluid tube for the rear window. And we'll kind of get the harness moved out of the way so that I can see the brake line that's behind it and start ripping pieces of it out. So you can see these gray clips just hold the wiring harness in place, whereas these black ones will need to be disconnected here. May need a screwdriver to pry that apart. So just use a screwdriver to pry that clip open so that this can be removed. And I'm not sure if you guys can see it because of the lighting back here, but the old brake line is up here along with everything else. So I'm not really sure what happened to the rest of the footage that I had where I showed removing the rest of the brake lines, but I don't have any. In the next clip, we're just going to jump right into installing the new ones. But basically the process is similar to what you've already seen, where I just kind of go along and pull the old lines out in chunks. In some cases I had to cut them a little bit, and in other cases they just kind of came out and disintegrated as I took them out because they were so rusted. And truth be told, it was easier to kind of remove them in short pieces rather than trying to remove that whole long snaky line out from under the truck, either in the back or the front. Okay, so I've got all the old lines off of the truck, and it's time to start trying to put the new lines on. This is the line that goes from the rear end to the ABS module. Okay, so the reason for this is to partly protect the end of the line, and this also should help keep it from getting caught on the wiring harness as I try to fish it from the wheel well up to the ABS module. Let's see what happens. But before I do that, there are stickers on the line, and in between these stickers we need to straighten the line. There's one bend there and one bend there that'll need to be straightened out. Okay, so I've got this pipe bending tool here that I'm going to try and use to bend this tubing without kinking it. Okay, so as you can see, that worked out pretty well. It's not perfect, but it should be good enough for this. So now I'll do the same thing over here and straighten out this bend. The key here is to kind of go slow and make sure you don't overbend it, and it should work out just fine. Okay, so I've got the other section straightened out. Now it's time for the fun part. Let's see if we can get this thing routed through the truck. So getting this line in was a fair bit easier than I expected it to be. I basically kind of worked it in to the gap here between the frame and the body as far as I could, and then I kind of rotated it 90 degrees, basically so that the free end of it was sort of up here, maybe around the gas filler or so, kind of out here. And then I kind of shoved it in a little bit and it kind of stopped again. And then I crawled under the truck and I was able to reach up around the frame rail, and I kind of felt where it was. It was just behind the ABS module. And I was able to kind of grab it and steer it around the wiring harness here. But anyway, I just kind of guided it above or below the wiring harness, and then I was able to just pull it the rest of the way. And now the other end is at the ABS module. And then this end, I was able to just kind of work it in here around the frame, and it's pretty much where it needs to be over there. But for now, I'm going to leave that end loose because I am going to replace all the lines here, and I don't have those parts yet. So hopefully you guys can see the line there with the duct tape on it. Now, like I said, I was able to get that fished in, and the spot where it kind of got hung up was back here, just behind this cross member, sort of just above where the gas tank starts here. I was able to reach my hand up in here and feel the line kind of coming through, and I think I was able to just kind of lift it above the wiring harness and kind of got it routed where it needs to be. So what I should be able to do now is remove that duct tape and get that line attached to the ABS module here. Got the line kind of routed into place, and I've got it started into the ABS module. It actually took me longer to get the duct tape off the end of it than it did to route it through the frame. So what I still need to do is just kind of work it along the top end of the frame. Of course, you guys can't see what's going on here, neither can I actually. I'm kind of doing it by feel. But what I need to do is reach up around the top of the frame here and kind of pull the line into place along the clips, and then get the wiring harness back where it belongs and kind of get everything routed the right way. So here's the front line that goes between the ABS module and the passenger side caliper. So I'm going to straighten this one out the same way that I did the other one with my bending tool. Okay, so as you can see, I've got this one straightened out. Now I have a feeling this one's not going to go into the truck as easily as the other one did because of all the bends here, but we'll give it a try and see what happens. So I'm going to start working in the passenger side front line here. You can see that the short side is what goes over to the passenger side brake hose, and this side over here on the driver's side goes up through the frame rails and snakes its way back to the ABS module. So I'm going to try and fight with this now. Hopefully you can kind of see what I'm doing here. I've got the line kind of up above the frame, and I'm just going to try and snake it in there amongst the wiring harnesses and the suspension parts and things like that. So that actually went a little easier than I thought it would. Took me maybe 15 or 20 minutes to kind of work this thing in. You can see we're looking at the bottom of the radiator support here. This is the front of the line that goes across the front of the truck. But the longer side, the driver's side, I got it snaked up through and just kind of alternated between pushing it from the front and pulling it from the back around everything, and then, you know, around the frame rail and the wiring harness and all that. So it's roughly where it needs to be. It's going to need a little fine-tuning here and there, but it's not bad. Now, one mistake that I made was that as I was pulling that end in, I forgot to keep an eye on this end, and it was just hanging loose. So when it was time to kind of push it in, I had to kind of bend the line just a little bit to kind of get it back up here around the frame rail where it needs to go. So if you're going to try this yourself, you'll want to keep an eye on this side as you're pulling the other side through, so you don't have to kind of bend it. Here's the last one that I need to put in. This, of course, is the driver's side front, and I'm just going to fish it in the way that I did the others, just kind of up above the frame rail and underneath everything, and hopefully this one goes in as easily as the other two did, and we'll be able to start tightening these things up here shortly. Okay, so the front driver's side definitely took the longest, and this, of course, is the shortest one. It kept wanting to go in, for lack of a better word, I'll call it upside down, where this part here that goes down into the brake hose kept wanting to point up. So I finally figured out what I needed to do, and that was sort of fish the line between this cab mount and the body up there, kind of in the upside down position. Once I got it worked in part way, I was able to kind of force the line to twist around, and then I was able to wrap it back up around the frame rail and kind of get it where it needs to be. Now everything up here is not quite positioned where it needs to be. Now I'm going to go through the process of just kind of working these back into the clips, getting them in the right order above the wiring harness or below it, or, you know, whichever place it needs to be. And then I can start tightening up the fittings. Okay, so as you can see, I've got all the lines routed and tightened up here. So I ended up modifying one of my Chinese wrenches here to make it shorter so that I could tighten up these fittings and clear this link right here. And that made things a lot easier. So I've got all of the lines up front done. And of course I've got the one line here to the rear done. And that actually goes up here. You guys can't see it, but it goes to this rubber hose that's here. Now I haven't connected it yet, and I'm not going to until I replace this hose and these rusty lines along the axle as well. So what I'll do now is crack everything loose and remove all this stuff. You can see I've been soaking it with PB Blaster for a bit. I've also been soaking the fittings at the caliper as well as the bleeder screws. Not sure if you can see it there because we're going to need to crack those later. I'm going to try not to have to replace the rear calipers, but if we have to, we have to. There's also a couple of bolts that hold these clips on that'll need to come out as well. One on the passenger side and one over here on the driver's side on the trailing link here. Okay, so I've got the steel lines cracked loose, and I kind of expected this, but you can see that they broke off here at the center fitting. Now another thing to mention is that on the passenger side you can see there's this plastic clip that I need to remove with a screwdriver. And then there was a bolt here. This one came out. Okay, you can see I've got the line loose here. It was hanging a minute ago. but it was bolted on like this. I started to remove this bolt, and as you can see, the head broke off. So when I place the new line, we're going to have to just figure out how to route it and hold it on. Okay, so as I started to pry on the clip, I barely put any pressure on it, and it actually broke. Here, so we're going to have to throw that away as well. But having said that, both of the lines are free and removed from the truck. So now I just got to go up top here behind this shield where the spare tire is and finish removing the rubber hose that's up here. Okay, hopefully you guys can see what's going on here, but this is the remains of the old brake line into the brake hose that's here. And of course I had left that sort of in place when I removed the brake line, but you can see I've just worked it out of that bracket. And now that it's down here, I can just remove this from this bracket and it's fully off the truck. Okay, so here's a look at the new brake hose. This is the end that goes up above where the spare tire is and connects into the brake line. Hopefully you can see here that there are some tabs on this. This is kind of keyed into the bracket. There's a wider tab on one side and a narrower tab on the other. And hopefully you can see up there in the bracket, those will correlate to the shape of the cutout there. So we'll just kind of get that up in there and clocked, and then I'll bring in the new brake line and put that in place. So as you can see, I've got the line into the brake hose, and you can see I've got that clip kind of partially put on over the fitting of the brake hose. I'll push that all the way on to keep everything in line before I tighten up the bottom part. I'm a little surprised Napa didn't include a new clip with the brake hose, so I've got to reuse the old one. Okay, so as you can see, I've got a piece of nickel copper brake line kind of bent here. This is a pre-flared section. This was 30 inches long, and it looks like it's just about right, maybe a touch long. I guess we'll see. You know, my bends aren't perfect, and of course I can flex this around where I need to. Now I'm not going to be able to put this bracket back on the truck anyway because I broke that bolt, so we're not going to need to worry about that. So we can kind of flex things around and get it where it needs to be in order to fit in. So here's a look at the other line. You can see I've got this one kind of bent up where it needs to be. Again, it's going to need a little fine tuning. Now this line was a little bit longer, so I went with a 40-inch line. That's what was in stock at the local auto parts store anyway, so it looks like it's going to be a decent fit. Okay, so as you can see, I've got all the lines in place here. They ought to work. It's not as pretty as the factory would have done, but I think it'll be okay. Now, one thing that I screwed up on, I didn't realize that these lines had a long fitting and a short fitting, and you can see here on one line I put the long fitting here and the short fitting is on the other one. Probably should have switched it around so that both of the long fittings were on here and the short ones were both on the brake hose over here, but I don't think it really matters at the end of the day. As long as they're tight and don't leak, it should be fine. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is secure the brake lines here. I'll probably put a zip tie or something through this hole where this bolt was, and then I'll figure something out over here on the other side. And then it's going to be time to put some fluid in here and see if it leaks. Okay, so here's a look at my brake line fitting. You can see it goes on this bracket and then goes into this brake hose, which wraps around and goes to the caliper over there. So that's all the footage that I managed to put together on the brake job here. Now, I will say that towards the end of the job, I just kind of got lazy with getting the camera out, and I just kind of wanted to get things done, so that's why the footage isn't there. I will also admit that this project took me longer than it probably should have, but I was trying to juggle this along with everything else and working 50 hours a week and that kind of a thing. So it took probably about 6 weeks for me to get this all completed. Not because it's a particularly hard project, but as you can probably tell from what you've seen so far, it's kind of a tedious one, and it's a messy one with all the brake fluid and everything to deal with. So having said all that, I hope this video was helpful, and if it was, I'd appreciate a thumbs up. And if you'd like to leave a comment or subscribe, feel free to do that as well. And if you'd like to support my channel in another way, please consider visiting my Amazon store, which you'll find linked in the description below. Thanks for watching.